Paul McCartney reveals the reason he wants it all to end. Most people think Paul McCartney has the perfect life. From the outside, it still looks that way. At 83, he just played 2 sold-out intimate shows at the Fonda Theatre in Hollywood. A new album is on the way. A major documentary about his post-Beatles years landed on Amazon Prime Video. By any measure, the man is thriving. But that surface has always hidden something deeper. In Lagos, men with knives took his demo tapes in the night. In Tokyo, he was handcuffed and thrown into a cell as prisoner 22. His marriage to Heather Mills turned into one of the ugliest divorces in British history. And through all of it, he carried a grief that started when he was 14 and never fully left him. Now, with his most personal album yet arriving on May 29, Paul has done something he has rarely done before. He has spoken openly about the days he feels are already behind him, and why he understands, finally, why some things simply have to end. Nobody expected that from him. In 1973, Paul McCartney took his band Wings somewhere far from comfort, all the way to Lagos in Nigeria, chasing a new sound for the album Band on the Run. It already felt risky, but things began to fall apart before the journey even started. Guitarist Henry McCullough and drummer Denny Sewell walked away just days before the flight, after arguments over money. Suddenly, it was just Paul, Linda McCartney, and Denny Laine holding everything together. They reached Lagos and stepped into a world that felt heavy and unpredictable. The heat inside Ginger Baker's studio was suffocating. There was no comfort, no ease, just pressure building from every side. Still, they pushed forward, recording almost everything themselves, trying to turn chaos into music. Then one night, everything took a darker turn. Paul and Linda were walking back with demo tapes in their hands. The early pieces of what they were building. Men with knives jumped them. There was no time to react. The bags were gone. The tapes vanished into the night. Later, he would say they were petrified, and you could feel it in the way the story stayed with him. As if that was not enough, days later Paul collapsed. His breathing tightened, and for a moment, Linda believed he had died right there in Nigeria. Through all of this, something strange happened. The struggle shaped the music. What should have broken them instead gave them a comeback story that felt alive and raw. A few years later, in 1976, Wings stepped into a completely different kind of storm. Their American tour exploded beyond expectations. 31 shows, all sold out, more than 600,000 fans, and a record-breaking $12 million earned at the time. Every arena was packed. Every night felt like proof that Paul was not finished after the Beatles. They moved like a traveling machine, flying between cities in a jumbo jet, delivering songs like Jet and Maybe I'm Amazed with full force. Even the Wings Over America live album captured something real, something that silenced every doubt people had been whispering. Wings were no longer a question. They were a force. But not every chapter brought cheers. In 1980, Paul returned to Japan, a place that had once refused him entry because of past drug issues. This time, he came ready, with shows planned and tickets sold. Everything seemed set. Within minutes of landing, it all collapsed. Officials searched his luggage and found over 200 grams of cannabis. He was arrested on the spot, handcuffed, and given the cold label of prisoner 22. The tour ended before it began. For 10 days, he lived inside that cell, feeling stripped of everything that made him who he was. Linda McCartney fought on the outside, angry and desperate. When he was finally released and sent out of the country, he called it silly, but the damage had already been done. Wings never really recovered from that moment. Years earlier, there had been another kind of loss, quieter but just as painful. Back in 1969, Paul and John Lennon had shared ownership of Northern Songs, the company that held their music. It should have been their empire. Instead, it slipped away without warning. Their partner, Dick James, secretly sold his shares. Paul tried to fight back, quietly buying more shares on the open market, but that only created tension with John, who felt betrayed. The chance to regain control faded as arguments grew. In the end, they lost ownership of their own songs. Music they had created together now belonged to someone else. It was a wound that stayed open for decades. Time moved forward, but life did not slow down. In 1995, everything shifted again when Linda was diagnosed with breast cancer. Paul stepped away from everything else and stayed by her side. He cancelled plans, ignored the outside world, and became simply a husband. When she passed in 1998, the silence that followed was immense. Paul said he cried for a year, on and off, unable to accept that she was gone. What made it even harder was the echo of the past. His mother, Mary, had died from the same illness when he was just 14. Back then, no one spoke openly about grief. The pain stayed hidden. Now, decades later, he had lived through it again, fully aware, but still unable to change the outcome. He tried to move forward. In 2002, he married Heather Mills, hoping for a fresh start. But slowly it turned into something else. By 2006, it ended in a messy, public divorce that became a stage for everything that had gone wrong. What began as hope ended in bitterness. Through all of this, one thing never fully left him: music. Now, in 2026, that truth has never been clearer. In March, Paul played 2 intimate, phone-free shows at the Fonda Theatre in Hollywood, just 1,200 people each night, the smallest rooms he has played in years. By every account, the performances were extraordinary: 102 minutes, a condensed version of the setlist from his Got Back Arena tour, plus rare bonus tracks that almost never make it off the soundcheck stage. People who were there described it as something close to a private concert from the most famous musician alive. And if those shows felt like a goodbye of sorts to the grand arena spectacle, what comes next suggests something more personal is beginning. On May 29, Paul releases The Boys of Dungeon Lane, his most introspective album to date and his first since McCartney 3 in 2020. The title comes from a real road in Speak, the working-class Liverpool neighborhood where he grew up, a narrow lane near his childhood home and George Harrison's, leading down to the Mersey shore where the two boys would go birdwatching and talk about guitars and rock and roll before the world had ever heard of the Beatles. Paul has said that Dungeon Lane is a place he still sees when returning home, an image that never left him. The album was recorded over 5 years, in sessions between legs of his Got Back tour, bouncing between Los Angeles and his studio in East Sussex. The lead single, Days We Left Behind, is the emotional core of the project. Paul described it simply: he was thinking about the days he left behind, wondering whether he is only writing about the past now, and then realizing the honest answer. How can you write about anything else? That question, coming from a man who has been writing songs since before most of the world was born, lands with a particular weight. It is not defeat. It is something quieter. It is a man looking back at the road he came from, the lane and Speak, the boy with the birdwatching book, the smoky bars and cheap guitars, and finally letting himself say that those days mattered as much as everything that followed. Even now, he performs. His Got Back tour concluded in November 2025 after more than 3 years on the road, ending in Chicago with the same extraordinary energy fans have come to expect: nearly 3 hours, song after song, spanning decades. Reports suggest a European tour may follow the new album's release later in 2026. He sings for John Lennon. He remembers George Harrison. In 2023, he used technology to bring back John's voice from an old demo, turning it into the final Beatles song, Now and Then. It felt like closing a circle that had been open for half a century. And now, with the Boys of Dungeon Lane, he is returning to the moment before the circle even began. In 2011, he married Nancy Shevell, and by every account, life finally quieted down. No drama, no chaos, just shared rides and ordinary days that did not need any attention. Looking back, the path feels almost unreal. A boy from Liverpool who once watched television through other people's windows became one of the richest, most beloved musicians in the history of recorded sound. But the money was never the full story. It was everything that came with it. The rise, the fall, the love, the loss, the fights, the grief, and the stubborn refusal to stop. Now, at the end of the road that began on a working-class street called Dungeon Lane, he is telling his own story at last. Not with bitterness. Not with regret. With rare openness, as the album notes say, writing about his childhood in post-war Liverpool and the early adventures with the boys he used to know, long before the world came rushing in. And maybe that is the real reason he wants certain things to end. Not because he is done, but because some stories deserve a proper ending, told honestly, in your own words, on your own terms. He is still here. Still writing. Still performing. And now, finally, remembering out loud.